Well, good evening and welcome to Eastleigh Borough Council's Cabinet meeting on this Thursday, 21st of May 2020, being broadcast courtesy of Microsoft Teams Live to residents and anyone interested in watching across the borough and beyond. This is a council meeting held in public rather than a public meeting, and it's designed to make sure that the council can continue doing business as a matter of routine during the COVID-19 emergency. During this evening's meeting, we'll be hearing from a range of cabinet members, and those that are participating in the meeting are coming up on your screen now. And we have apologies at the moment from Councillor Rupert Curl, who has some internet problems that we're trying to sort out. All the other members that you see on the screen will be taking part in this evening's meeting. We have support from staff during the course of the meeting. They'll pop in and make comments if necessary on any of the reports that they've written. But in the meantime, my name is Keith House and I'm chairing this evening's meeting, and we'll be running through the business that we have in front of us. Now, we start off with public participation at our meetings. It's a regular slot, which is an opportunity for members of the public to raise issues that they have, and indeed councillors to raise issues that are not on the agenda that they want to be considered by the Cabinet. I have one request from a member of the public to speak, which I'm not going to take this evening. I'll explain why. I have a very long and detailed question and statement from Dr. James Taylor from Hedge End, who raises some really interesting points about traffic regulation orders and the policy that's attached to those. Traffic regulation orders under the council scheme of delegation are a matter for our local area committees to decide on, and so Dr. Taylor's statement will go to that meeting, which takes place in a few weeks' time. I've had email correspondence with Dr. Taylor during the course of the day, so he understands the rationale behind the council's approach, and we'll be coming to him then, and we wish him good luck. And the fact that he sent us his statement does mean that we'll have an opportunity for staff to look at the issues that he wants to raise to make sure that we're able at that meeting to give him a full response. During the course of this evening's meeting, we have an independent councillor, Councillor Parker Jones, who wishes to contribute on the COVID-19 item, and we'll be introducing Councillor Parker Jones at that point in the meeting. But at the start of the meeting, given there's no members of the public wanting to speak, but there is a councillor wanting to speak, I'll ask Councillor Gin Tidridge from Bishopstoke to raise her question now. Gin.
Thank you. I've got a question for the leader of the council, which doesn't relate to an agenda item, so thank you very much indeed for giving me the opportunity to ask it. Can the leader state whether Eastleigh Borough Council will be asking for provision in Winchester City Council's next local plan for the road that EBC had proposed to link the SGO north of Bishopstoke and Fair Oak to the B3335 at Highbridge, now that the inspector has requested that the SGO be deleted from EBC's local plan? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, Gin. The inspector wrote to the council, for those who've not followed this, at the beginning of April with a quite detailed letter setting out her areas of concern and interest and support for the council's local plan that went through its examination in public during the course of the last year, having been submitted to the government 18 months ago. In her letter, she set out a range of areas where she thought the council could move towards an adopted local plan, asked for some additional work to be taking place on a range of policy issues, and also asked for the council to delete the policy for a strategic growth area north of Bishopstoke and Fair Oak. There are a range of other quite complex and interrelated issues in the inspector's letter, and the council has taken a position of not responding to detailed inquiries on the inspector's letter at this stage until we're able to give a comprehensive response. And that, I can assure you, Gin, will happen at a cabinet meeting at some point in the next 2 months, where we'll have a quite lengthy session on the local plan. And so I'm not in a position this evening to answer one question in isolation about the content of the local plan and how we want to proceed with our neighbours, given there are a whole stack of issues, not just about housing supply, but also about environmental protection and how we manage to get traffic congestion off our roads and reduce air pollution. And all those issues need to be considered together rather than in isolation. So did you have any supplementary on that one for this evening, Gin?
No, thank you. It was simply about the interaction between Eastleigh's local plan and Winchester's local plan and the link road. But presumably that from your answer, that'll be dealt with later.
Yes, it will. And thanks very much for the question. It's a good one. It's one that we had already started to think about because there are lots and lots of implications from the inspector's letter about how we make sure that we do get a housing supply for the future, and also how we achieve the whole range of other council policies that are in place for environmental protection and over and beyond that are important to residents right the way across the borough, as well as the long-term issues of growth that need to be considered and will need to be part of the council's review of its local plan, which will be starting on fairly quickly after the adoption of a local plan. So thank you, Jin, for that. That's the only item of public participation that I have for this evening's meeting. So we can go on to the meeting proper, and just check apologies. Rupert Curl has sent apologies for not being able to get his internet working so far. I'm sure that's a technical issue that the council is responsible for rather than Rupert. We'll pick that up, and apologies to Rupert for, Rupert has just joined us just as we speak. So we'll use that as an opportunity to welcome Rupert to the meeting, and thank you for being able to log in just as we're about to move into the main business of the meeting, Rupert. So we have all members of Cabinet now in attendance, so there are no apologies to be given. The next item on our agenda is the minutes of the last meeting, which was the first online meeting, and we are pretty sure was the first online live broadcast Cabinet meeting of any council in Hampshire. So thanks for those who participated in that. The minutes have been printed and circulated in advance. Are there any issues on those minutes that anyone wishes to raise before we adopt them? Now, for the benefit of those who are watching this broadcast, I'm looking at my screen, which means that I can see nodding heads and shaking heads rather of Cabinet members around the table, and no one saying they want to raise any items, so I will take that as assent to agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of April. Thank you, colleagues, for that. Now, the next item on our agenda, it's a standing item, is to ask councillors if they have any items they want to declare as a matter of interest. These are items that would preclude councillors from taking part in any debate or voting on any items. We ask for those to be recorded at this stage as part of transparency, just general probity, to make sure that we're doing the right thing, and not just doing the right thing, but also being seen to do the right thing. Are there any declarations of interest that anyone wishes to raise?
No.
No, and I'm getting a mixture of head shaking there, and that's fine. Good, thank you very much, colleagues. So we'll move on to the first substantial item on our agenda this evening, which is COVID-19 and the council's response. We had a lengthy debate on the COVID-19 issues at our Cabinet meeting in April. A really helpful debate, and there were some very helpful questions that were raised by councillors from around the borough too. We tried to give those due diligence because we weren't able at that stage to include more members online being broadcast as part of the meeting, and so the bulk of the meeting was actually taken up by answering questions from councillors, but that in effect gave us the cue to debate the issues that were concerned around COVID-19 and the council's response. The council, along with dealing with the issues that are of relevance to all members of the public at the moment, is continuing to make sure that we maintain public services. Our primary responsibility is to make sure that we protect the safety of residents and the safety of businesses and the safety of borough council staff at this quite difficult time. Beyond that, we want to make sure that we're starting to support thinking about recovery. Whilst we're all staying safe by mainly staying at home and staying alert, as the buzzword from the government is, clearly we do need to make sure that we work on economic recovery as well as environmental protection and protecting the health of our residents and businesses. That process is now started. We'll come on to one of the items later on the agenda around support for businesses and an additional grant fund, where we have £1 million available, best part of £1 million available to support local businesses that haven't qualified for other grants. But this paper that's in front of the Cabinet this evening gives a further update of activities over the course of the last month, as well as another financial health check to demonstrate that we are prudent with our finances and we've planned for the future with some confidence, and therefore we're moving ahead smoothly. There's a lot of activity going on. I want to again put on record my thanks to some absolutely fantastic work that's been taking place from council staff over the borough. I think we've all seen pictures of stickers on bins where residents have thanked staff that have been collecting waste, but also we've seen staff out doing groundwork around the place, cleaning the streets, cutting the grass, all those things that are really important to our residents, and they're doing that in some quite challenging circumstances overall. And so by putting our thanks to them on record, that I think is really important for us to do. The wider public sector is, of course, dealing with a whole raft of other issues, and we all think a lot about the work of staff in our hospitals, in our care homes, who are putting themselves in jeopardy on a daily basis for the greater protection of everyone, and that's just quite remarkable. And I hope as a country we're able in the future to properly recognise that by actually making sure we properly fund our NHS and properly fund healthcare and social care in a way that we haven't always in the past. And that will be, I think, one of the lessons that we've learned from this pandemic. I've got one councillor wanting to ask a question on the paper, so we'll move to Councillor Louise Parker-Jones to ask a question on the paper, and then we'll see where that takes us in terms of debate and commentary from there. So, Louise, over to you.
Oh, hello, thank you. Yes, I'm actually asking about the health of the council's finances during COVID-19. I became aware of an article that was published in the Local Government Chronicle on the 15th of May, and it said that within that article it stated that Eastleigh Borough Council is more exposed than most councils to risk because of its reliance upon its property portfolio and the income it generates. So within that article, the chief executive stated that yes, we are very reliant, and in the short term that we're not expecting that to be a massive problem, which is great. But beyond that, there is a complex picture building up that we might lose perhaps some major tenants, and that is a real difficulty that we might have. So I suppose as a result of that article, I have two kind of questions that arise from it. One is, it states in the short term we'll be fine. Well, how long is the short term? How long do we feel we can weather this downturn and the potential loss of income from our property portfolio? And what other plans that the council is now putting into place just in case this is a very, very long and drawn out recession where we do lose those major businesses and that major income? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, okay, thank you very much for that question, Louise. Those are really good points, and I know that residents will have seen commentary in the press and on TV screens about the state of public sector finance over the course of the last few weeks. And councils are as exposed as anywhere else in the public sector. In some ways, councils are more exposed than the rest of the public sector because we rely for most of our income from income that comes from places other than government grants. We rely on income from our council tax, from business rates being shared across the country, and we also rely on our commercial income and from fees and charges. One thing that we've been really, really careful on as a council over the course of the last couple of months is very, very carefully scrutinising our finances, working through projections of where we think income is going to go, where we think expenditure is going to change. And so the appendix to the paper that was circulated for councillors to read shows a medium-term financial plan that goes right the way through to 2025 based on current best estimates of where both income and expenditure will be, including any changes that arise from either changes from government funding or indeed from the council's income streams. We are in a better position than many councils because we have got a diverse set of income streams coming into the local authority. So far as our commercial investments are concerned, we took a very clear view many years ago to make sure that we had a wide cross-section of investments in our local economy and that we understood each of those investments very carefully. Now, there is clearly a risk for some councils, mainly other parts of the country, that took a decision to borrow heavily to invest in property outside of their area. And we haven't done that. We have a small number of investments outside the borough boundary, but the vast majority of our investments are held locally, which means that we have a very, very close relationship with our tenants. We know about the issues of problems that they're facing, and we're working with them on a day-to-day basis. So our property team, our asset team, and our finance team have been working very closely on those issues over the last couple of months. The consequence of that is that the medium-term financial plan update that we've circulated today, and again that's an update on the one that was circulated last month, shows that our financial position is pretty robust. The Local Government Chronicle did publish a report a few days ago, which, as you can expect with any journalist, a journalist will look for the juicy comments that they want to report and not necessarily put the whole picture in context. So I'm very pleased to have this opportunity, and thank Louise for her question this evening, to be able to give reassurance that all of the work that we're doing suggests that our finances are secure, that we have a plan to make sure that that remains the case. We also have significant reserves built up in our property account, which were purposely designed to carry the burden in the event of any short to medium term loss of income. That reserve is substantial, and it gives us a degree of protection that most councils haven't got. Over and beyond that, many local authorities have taken capital grants and put them into their revenue income stream and just spent them as revenue. So many councils have spent their New Homes Bonus, which is a grant from government, to prop up their revenue accounts. We have not done that. We have taken a much more prudent and careful response to make sure that we only use those one-off sources of income for one-off projects. Louise, is there any follow-up you wanted to raise to my response at the moment?
No, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we were all sighted on it and what was actually going to happen. So I'll be looking at the medium-term financial strategy on a regular basis now.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Much appreciated, and your question is very helpful, and I'm sure that's helped people understand some of the issues a little bit more. We will spend as much time as it takes off camera, making sure that all the financial issues are secure as we move forward, because it is really, really important that we get that right for all of our residents. So can I turn to colleagues around the cabinet table and ask if anyone wants to speak on any of the COVID-19 items this month? There's an opportunity for anyone to say anything about their portfolios that they consider to be relevant right now or likely to be going on over the course of the coming weeks. And at the moment, I've got no one. Yes, I have. David Airy wants to come in. So
yes, please.
I'll ask David Airy. David Airy, cabinet member for transport and infrastructure.
On the to Louise's question, I thought her question really issues raised there, but we also have other investments, not just property investments. The investments which we was people's individual investments they've made through banks and so on have lost a fair percentage of their value over the last few weeks. And I'm just wondering what the situation is with regard to the council's investments in that area. The other thing I was going to raise under this while I'm speaking is as we start, and it's the recovery area which I'm most interested in, as we start moving back into recovery and people start using public transport again, as I hope they will return to do very quickly, and in the numbers, though there will be lower numbers, I think, to start within the areas. It's been suggested that people have to wear masks, and I can understand that. But at the present time, there's a huge difficulty in getting hold of masks in places where you can buy them. If you go to a pharmacy, for example, and ask about them, they just laugh at you, some of them, as if you're something coming, one of those little green men from space that was mentioned earlier on. So I'm wondering whether there's the opportunity for us to look into ways of perhaps vending machines, say at the bus station, and also getting in touch with South West Trains and asking them about provision of similar at main stations. I'm not expecting the small stations to have them, but Southampton Airport Parkway, Winchester Eastleigh, Southampton Central and so on, because this will make life a lot easier for a lot of people and attract people back. It's happening on German stations, I know, because I've seen photographs of it, so I see no reason why it shouldn't happen here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Now, sadly, your internet connection was breaking up quite badly during a lot of your contribution, David. So I know not all colleagues have managed to hear a lot of what you said, but I hope
I thought Paul was straining his face.
Yeah. That's okay, David. So I think the areas that I think you were covering, firstly around the council's exposure to cash investments into banks. We're not exposed to any real extent with the banking sector, so there's not an issue there. So far as masks are concerned, we're going to have to wait for government initially to come up with some thoughts on this, because at the moment you're absolutely right. We have got no ability to supply people with masks in any quantity other than those that they make themselves, because shops simply don't sell them. So a lot of thought is going to have to be given to that, whether we're in a position to intervene in that market and create a market for ourselves for the benefit of residents. I think is something to think about, but government is clearly going to need to respond. Rupert Curl wanted to come in. Rupert, we're really pleased that you managed to get your internet up and running. That's very good, as well as getting home from work, which I know was a bit of a trial this evening. So your turn.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me. My apologies for being a bit late and having a few internet problems. Hopefully they'll get resolved relatively shortly. I just really wanted to turn to the report and very much echo, I think, your comments in effect about the how our staff have been dealing with this issue, frankly, to be honest with you, and actually are quite low sickness record going through this, given the significant issues and stresses and strains that obviously everybody, but also every family, have been experiencing throughout this crisis, and also the professional way in which all of our staff, frankly, have been carrying out their duties on a daily basis, which I certainly know has been very much well received by all the residents, and I know that things, gifts, if you like, are being left out for bin men and our operatives, etc. And I know that any sort of sense of normality, shall we say, is very much welcomed by the general public at large. But also, I just wanted to pass on my thanks in effect as well to that we are actually recognising the stresses and strains that potentially and the financial stresses that our staff may be experiencing at this time, along with a lot of other people, and the fact that we have committed to be paying 100% of people's wages, not just taking an easy option in effect of only paying 80% where we might be able to do so, but by committing to do that, actually it clearly shows that we are prepared to look after our staff and invest in our staff, because we want to retain them into the future. And this is all part of coming out of the lockdown, but also it's also making sure we're supporting our staff during this very difficult time. So I just wanted to draw members and also members of the public's attention to the fact that the Borough Council are taking this responsible stance with regards to paying their employees the full amount, 100%, through this difficult time, which clearly shows our intent of wanting to retain staff into the future to provide those services for our residents.
Thanks very much, Rupert. That's absolutely right. And I've been really impressed to see photos of staff doing jobs that are anything like their regular day job, coming as a matter of routine, and the way people have been prepared to adapt and do things differently, I think has been absolutely amazing, and a great testament to actually the wider community spirit that we're seeing right across the borough, with volunteers popping up, people from all sorts of different jobs and backgrounds and careers volunteering to do things. There are some great strengths in our community, and it's good to see those. That's giving a bit of a light into these times of darkness. Derek Pretty wants to come in now on this paper, so we'll ask him for his contribution. Derek.
Come in.
Derek, your microphone's muted at the moment. Thank you. Derek, you've muted it again, I'm afraid. No, one click. That's it. That's it. Well done.
I'll keep my hands clear this. I'm sorry about the fact. Firstly, one little minor point on item 41, the borough-wide flyer that was supposed to be sent to all parts of the borough by Royal Mail. I don't think Grange Park and many parts of Hedge End ever received it. Can I take it that we'll be either reissuing it or chasing Royal Mail up for an apology? That's a minor point. Second point, on the recovery process, I'm concerned that in order to try and keep social distancing in Eastleigh, where the pavements are very narrow, or relatively narrow, and we've got parked cars both sides of the road, that we as a borough council take due consideration of how we're going to manage that, because obviously the shops are quite small. They may only want one, maybe two people in at a time. People maybe wanted to queue outside on the pavement and maintain that 1.5 to 2 meters distance. There has been talk about trying to temporarily close roads to enable social distancing to take place. I just really want to make sure that's on the agenda for our staff when they're preparing the recovery plan for the economy. I think it's important to encourage people into the town centre by making them feel as safe as they possibly can. That's really my important point, and I hope that colleagues on ELAC and the borough would agree with me on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek. So still with those points in reverse order, the issue of access around our town centres is something which I know the County Council, as our highway authority, is beginning to look at and consider what changes need to be made to make sure that free movement as near as possible is able to take place while still ensuring social distancing. Those are quite difficult issues in many of our centres, particularly those that as you say, have got narrow pavements, and there could be congestion. I think people are generally going to be pretty sensible. They have been so far in most cases. Fortunately, we haven't got Southend Beach here, and I would hope that that pattern of sensible behaviour will continue over the coming weeks. We will be liaising with the County Council on a lot of those issues. On the first point on Royal Mail, I'm glad you've raised that, because I've not had the Borough Council's leaflet delivered to me in Hedge End, and of all the people I've spoken to who live in the Hedge End area, so far I've only found one person who's had their leaflet from the Borough Council, and that was only received yesterday. And yet these leaflets were sent to the Royal Mail now a month ago to be delivered within a week or so. It is very disappointing to get that service from the Royal Mail. We know that there are still significant tracts of Eastleigh and Horton Heath that have not had the leaflet, and most parts of Hedge End and the fringes of Burslem haven't yet too. We have not had satisfactory replies from Royal Mail as to why our literature hasn't been delivered, given that we've paid them to deliver it, or we'll pay them, or at least we'll pay them some of what they're asking for. But as well as that, we've incurred print costs to get literature out at a time which is quite critical. The content of some of that leaflet is now a little bit dated because it was written now over a month ago, although the core issues and all the contacts that are there still remain the same. We've published some of that information on our website, through social media, on Facebook and on Twitter, but nothing beats getting something pushed through your letterbox by the friendly postal staff. I'm sure it's not the individual postal staff that are the issue here. There's a management mistake that's happened somewhere along the line, which hasn't resulted in our literature being delivered to help our residents. So yes, we are pressing that, and we'll continue to do so, because I'm certainly not satisfied. I know that many people also aren't too. So we're going to go to Paul Bicknell next, who wanted to come in. After we've heard from Paul, we'll hear from Tonya Craig. And so Paul, over to you now.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, well, firstly, I agree with everybody that's mentioned with reference to our staff. It is quite reassuring when you put up posts on some of the local forums on Facebook. The amount of likes that you get from members of the public with the positive stories of bin men and our street scene team keeping our areas nice and what have you. And so obviously the public appreciate our staff as well. That is clear to see, as do we all appreciate them. And obviously it's not just the staff that we actually see on the streets. You know, we know, but our staff are like an iceberg. What you see is the top third, i.e. our refuse collectors and street scene, but there's a whole host of people behind the scenes that nobody ever sees, pulling all this together, that don't necessarily get publicly thanked, but I'd like to publicly thank all those staff that sit behind the scenes and pull this all together now. Anyway, the purpose of actually wanting to speak was to pick up on Councillor Parker-Jones' point with reference to the finances. And it's a very good point, and it's very encouraging to see that due to our very prudent financial management over the years, we're in a very sort of strong position. There is obviously a recovery phase. We might still be in a pandemic phase, but whilst you're still in a pandemic phase, you have to start going into recovery phase, because obviously the two one will tailor off. Well, hopefully one will scale down as the recovery phase then starts to scale up, and there's an overlap. And local councils will have a very large part to play in the recovery, not just for all the health reasons that are widely reported in the media, but for my cabinet portfolio, actually also our local centres and businesses. It will be local councils that have predominantly up until now and definitely going into the future that will be regenerating our town centres. That process had already started because there had already been a shift in the way that people were, their shopping habits had changed, and the high street was changing. Now that is, potentially going to change dramatically, and it's local councils that that will be able to intervene and reshape those town centres and those communities. With the best will in the world, government is not going to be able to throw money at every single town council or every single town, village and city in the country to support town centres, rejuvenate, regenerate, do traffic management to increase footpaths and such like, all the things that a lot of councils and we were moving forward to up until this pandemic. So it's very encouraging to see that, but due to our investments over the years, and of course you never have all your eggs in one basket, that we have got the financial reserves to get us through this and still enable us to carry on looking at the regeneration of our local centres, albeit we'll be looking at things slightly differently than we were 3 months ago. So that's very encouraging. So that's all I wanted to comment on. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks so much, Paul. I think that's absolutely right. And the flexibility that we've got, because we are a significant investor in our place, means that we are able to be more responsive to a lot of the issues that are going to become very, very important over the course of the coming weeks and months and years as the economy changes to reflect people's changed lifestyles. And those are serious. They really are important. Now, I was going to go to Tonya next, but I've just had a prod from stage left. The Rupert needs to come in because he has an interest to declare, because we strayed into talking about the Royal Mail.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Sorry, as we were referencing Royal Mail and obviously the delivery that the Borough Council had commissioned for Royal Mail to deliver house to house, just wanted to declare an interest on the reasons of openness and transparency, as I actually am an employee of Royal Mail. However, I just want to clarify the fact that I'm not actually at management level, which clearly would have been dealing with this particular item for delivery, probably more on the receiving end rather than the other end, but just wanted to declare that for openness and transparency. Thank you.
Okay, we won't shoot the messenger there, Rupert, at least not this stage just yet. So thank you for that. And I don't think we were blaming you either along the way. And this isn't really about blame, it's about systems. And clearly there's been a systems breakdown, and it does need to be got sorted out, because communication matters more rather than less at the moment. And that's really important. Right, now I'm looking to go to Tonya next. There's a bit of an internet problem in Bursledon at the moment, which suggests that I can't bring Tonya up to broadcast to the world just at the moment. Was there anyone else looking to speak before we go there? Not at the moment, it seems. Right, we now have got the connection to Bursledon restored. So let's see if we can get bring in Tonya.
I've been here. There's not been an issue, but it might be a hedge end problem. Don't blame Bursledon. Just a lot of what's been said already of what I was going to say. Again, I just want to put my thanks on record to the staff who really are going above and beyond. But my point that is really of reassurance for both Lou that was on earlier and members of the public, that as cabinet members, our portfolios are already looking at recovery. So we're looking at putting things in place. We're talking about what things that we're going to be needing to encourage people not only back to work, but back into the public, back into public places. So that is already going on in the background. It was more of a reassurance thing that we are looking at that already. But yes, there's so many people to thank. Like you say, the staff have been absolutely brilliant, but volunteers, our resilience hubs, I know we've done this before, but they just need to be kept up to praise, I think, because it's changing on a daily basis. But I think a lot of these resilience hubs are going to get busier before they actually fall off. So there's a lot of work around there as well still. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tonya. I think it's absolutely right to keep pointing that out, because we know that certainly we're all spending more time on recovery now than we are thinking about the issues from the direct issues. But the recovery is going to have attached to it a very, very substantial recession. So alongside the continued impact of the pandemic with social distancing, and as we move towards antibody tests and vaccinations, hopefully at some point in the future, returns to work in what at the moment are totally inappropriate spaces and getting more use of public transport, we're also going to have to think about all of those issues that link to the recession. Now, I've got no one else waving at me around. Yes, I have. Ian Corbin wants to come in. Let's see if we can bring Ian in. And Ian, you'll need to unmute.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. I just wanted to, I was pleased to see in the report we mentioned about parish and town councils, and I just wanted really just to emphasise the hard work that has clearly gone into those parished areas of the borough and the support that they've given to residents. I've got a sign on my thing saying unmute your mic. You are live, but your mic is muted. Ah, there we go.
We can hear you. We can hear you. You were muted when you started.
So really, it was just to acknowledge really the parish councils and also their structures, because clearly they're being run, and the services that they provide are clearly very welcomed by residents. And again, it goes back to really what Paul was saying earlier about largely about things that are happening behind the scenes, and I think it's important that we quite rightly recognise that. And I note, Chair, that you wrote to the parish councils and parish and town councils. I'm obviously involved with Hedge End Town Council, and I know the hard work and the time and due diligence that goes into running that, and to all the grounds workers there to keep things going. So I just wanted to acknowledge that in this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian. And as you say, parish councils and town councils across most of the borough, it's only a part of Eastleigh which is not parished at the moment. Eastleigh Town have had to pick up quite a lot of the legwork around our open spaces and providing some additional services to our residents. They've all risen to that challenge. Most of them are managing to hold virtual meetings, something like this, not quite broadcast on Teams Live, but certainly having Teams meetings or Zoom meetings as the world has moved to Teams and Zoom land. And it's credit to them for managing to do that so quickly. Now, I really do have no one else wishing to speak at this stage, so I'm going to take the recommendations on the paper, which is to note the paper as read if colleagues are happy for me so to do. And that looks to be the case from nods around the table. So we'll move on to the next item, which is appointments to outside bodies. We have a raft of outside bodies to appoint to. For those members of the public watching, please look up on the council's website the various bodies that we're talking about. I want to just take all these on block because I think they're all straightforward. So are colleagues happy that we take these items 6, 7 and 8 as printed? And again, I'm seeing nods here. Tonya wants to speak. No, was that speaking or nodding? Was that speaking, Tonya? No, it was just waving. Okay, all right. We'll take that as a very friendly wave. Thank you very much, Tonya Craig, for that one. So all the appointments to outside bodies have been agreed. We have now got David wishing to come in. So we'll take David now. David, you're muted again. David's internet connection is clearly difficult this evening. Right, we have, I'm afraid, lost our connection to Netley at the moment, so we'll hopefully get David's comments a little bit later in the meeting. Apologies to David that we can't take you live at the moment. We're just, those of us watching a wider screen, see that David is just temporarily disappeared. David, you've got your camera off now. Let's see if we can get you involved.
He's back
now. He's back. Let's see. Stop. If you can take yourself off mute, David. We'll try now.
Right. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, there was a question with regard to some of the other outside bodies which people sit on. For example, I'm on the Airport Consultative Committee. You do Southeast Councils and things like that. They're not actually mentioned in this report, and I was just wondering whether we need to have those added in somewhere so as to reconfirm those who attend those meetings. I know some of these outside bodies, they're filled by people from local area committees, which is slightly different. But I was just thinking some of these bigger ones that come through the cabinet. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David, for that. So let's deal with each of those in turn. Some of the bodies that you mentioned actually are tucked away here. So Southeast Councils. Actually, it's not. It's Southeast Employers here. There are a number of appointments that are routine and made simply by council and are self-perpetuating, and they go with cabinet positions. So those are on this report. Those appointments that relate to local area committees will be going to the next available local area committee meeting for them to agree. So when you get to your Bursland and Hamble and Hound local area committee at the beginning of next month, you'll see those local appointments are on the agenda as you normally would. So this is not quite the same as normal, because the issues that would normally be covered as part of the council's main committees at the annual meeting have simply rolled over in the same way that appointments to cabinet have, and indeed the mayor and deputy mayor have. I think I've now got to the point where we are finally concluding the appointments to outside bodies, so I'll take that as agreed. We have one additional agenda item this evening which has come along quite late, but it's a really important one, which is around discretionary business grants policy. I'm going to ask Derek Pretty to speak to this in just a moment, but this is an unusual opportunity for us to make some direct choices on support for businesses around the borough, over and beyond where government has directly allocated funds for particular businesses. So Derek, would you like to speak to this paper? Thank you.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, Chair. Just a brief introduction. I think the paper is fairly straightforward, but colleagues will know after the lockdown, government announced a number of financial measures to assist businesses to mitigate their losses and costs. Amongst those were the small business and the retail, leisure and hospitality grant funds. These have been very successful and received well by the business community, but there are some small and micro businesses who haven't, for various reasons, qualified for these funds and don't qualify for funds or other forms of support. This grant fund, which is just under £1 million, is aimed at those businesses that haven't received previous grants, and a contribution towards the ongoing property-related costs. They're businesses who offer a lot to the borough by creating business and generating interest in the town centre. And I think it's important that we give them every support we can. The applications will take place as from next Monday if the recommendations are accepted, finished on the 12th of June, and hopefully we will then be making payments or recommendations, I think, on the 15th of June, so that these businesses will have money in their banks by backs payment within days of that date. And other than that brief overview, I'd like to commend the recommendation to colleagues and ask them to support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Derek. Now, I'd like to thank staff for the amount of time that's gone into putting this item together, because we've had to consider quite a lot of issues at quite short notice to be able to get this up and running, particularly given that we do want to make sure that these funds can be dispersed to businesses sooner rather than later. So anyone connected with the business community that is watching this now, we will be advertising the package quite widely on social media and on our website, and www.eastleigh.gov.uk is the place to go if you haven't already got contact with any members of council staff on these discretionary business grants. I'm going to take Paul Bicknell next. Derek Pretty wants to come back, but if anyone else wants to come in after Paul, now is the time to indicate to me. Paul.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. Yes, no, I just wanted to just say that I do, after what Councillor Pretty said, I do support this paper. I think that this is a very good way of being able to help our local businesses. I understand obviously that the money is coming from central government, but I think it is the right thing to do that the actual money comes direct to Eastleigh Borough Council, because we know our businesses. We know where the micro businesses are. They don't have to go searching. They don't have to fill in whole try and get in on a government website, along with umpteen tens of thousands of other businesses across the country. So, and knowing how Eastleigh Borough Council works and has worked so far to date with administering loans to businesses and that, then I'm confident that Eastleigh Borough Council will be able to administer this quickly and get the get the money to those businesses that apply and that qualify swiftly, so that they are supported as best they possibly can. So yeah, fully support the paper. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, let's go straight back to Derek Pretty then.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I should have mentioned at the time, I'd like to express my thanks to all the team that have been administrating the grant so far to date. They've awarded grants of, I think, nearly 15 million. Put my tongue back here. 15 million pounds to over 1,150 businesses locally. I think it's a grand effort by them, and I think our thanks should go out to them. I think this one will be similarly dealt with. They've got a lot of information from the previous applications that they couldn't approve, so I think the intention is to try and look at those and say, well, you didn't qualify for that, we think you may do here, if we could have a little bit more information. So I think a lot of the information is already there. I'm sure that we'll be able to help a lot of business fairly quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek. I'm just going to ask Tina Campbell if she wants to come in on this item, on the basis that Tina has herself got a small micro business and must have the connections with other small micro businesses, just in terms of the general support that's been available to her and indeed anyone else on these issues.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly would like to add my support for this initiative, and I'm very aware of the stress that this current situation has put people under. And I've had, as I'm sure many of us have had, members of our community contacting me because they haven't been able to apply for, other support and grants. So this is a really welcome initiative, and I'm very grateful to the team for putting this together so quickly and comprehensively. Thank you, Chair.
I've got no one else wanting to speak on this item that I can see, so our colleagues happy to agree the paper that's here with the policy attached to it for dispersing business grants, and hopefully we'll be able to get those out the door just as soon as possible. Thank you very much for that. That brings us to the end of our meeting this evening, so I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance. It's been a good debate and good series of discussions. Thank our visitors along the way too, and indeed all the staff support behind the scenes that make this possible. And with apologies that broadband at different points in both Netley and Burslem wasn't quite as good as we'd like it to have been. I'm sure that BT is under some stress as well, getting this stuff to work. So thank you very much, colleagues, for your attendance. And that concludes the end of this meeting. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.